I've been looking over our first round of opinion essays and have noticed that students are struggling to come to grips with the idea of a body paragraph, a fully developed body paragraph. Since my technology was a little glitchy on the day that I originally taught this mini lesson, I'm hoping to give you an overview of the points that we talked about that day. The first thing I would like to bring your attention to is the checklist that we use in class. We created this checklist based on our observations that were made when we looked at a sample essay at the very beginning of the unit. We noticed patterns, we noticed ways in which the author approached things, and we noted them down. This was our basic essay structure. We learned this essay structure and we can apply it to any essay that we write. Now, there are 3 body paragraphs in our essay because we are learning the basic 5-paragraph essay. And what we notice, first of all, is that the body paragraph is indented. And it may seem silly to point this out and to have this on our checklist, but students are still struggling to understand what it means to indent a paragraph and exactly what that should look like. The next thing that we noticed is that the paragraph begins with a transitional phrase. Now, students are given a lovely chart to use during our workshop time with all kinds of transitional phrases that can be used at different points in the essay. The first row here shows the transitional phrases that can be used in the body paragraphs. I encourage students to try to work across the row. So if they choose for the first one, they want to say first and then second and then third. I talk about how they can also challenge themselves to do some of the different ones. First of all, next, finally. And then once they become more advanced writers, they may come up with their own transitional phrases that they would like to use, and they're welcome to add them to their chart. After the transitional phrase on our checklist, we see that the main idea sentence, the first main idea sentence, is written. Now, one of the misconceptions that students have is that the transitional phrase and the sentence do not necessarily flow together. And what they're doing is they're writing first, comma, and then their next word is capitalized as if it were the beginning of a sentence. So that's a misconception that we seem to need to address. Now, once we have the transitional phrase, students only just need to go to their planning sheet, and if the planning sheet has been filled out properly, they just have to copy the main idea sentence that they have on the planning sheet. It's a pretty simple process. Then we come to the more complicated process of trying to elaborate on our main idea. Basically, the role of the author here is to explain the main idea well enough so that the reader understands it. This is difficult for students, and so once again, we have some prompts and some transitional phrases that students can use in this process. Here on our chart, we have the transition to introduce evidence. So when we're introducing a detail to support our main idea, we might say, for example, or for instance. And then when we move on to the next one, we might say another example, or to add on additionally. So this list, again, is provided for students to look at. As they become more advanced, they can add some of their own. But it's not just enough to provide the evidence. Okay, if I said ice cream is great because there are so many flavors, and then I just list all the flavors without elaborating on it, I'm not really talking to you about what makes this ice cream so great. So once a child, or an author I should say, once a writer introduces the detail, they then need to elaborate on it. Okay, what does this show? And sometimes these elaboration prompts are not necessarily showing up in the writing, although they can, especially for a beginning writer, but they're more to get the writer to think about what they want to say. We told a story about my grandson Dominic just giving a one-word answer to a question that I asked, and how I kind of leaned forward and tried to encourage him to say more. And so we kind of use this phrase of saying more. So we present the detail and then we say more about it. Okay, so this chart can be used by students at any time during the writing process. Finally, what we noticed about the essays that we were looking at was that at the very end, there is a sentence that kind of restates what the main idea has been about that paragraph, and then somehow connects it to the thesis, shows how it's connected. So it's really important for students to recognize this structure and to also be able to duplicate it in their own writing. Let me show you the example that we looked at as a class. We looked at this essay about the 4th of July, and we looked at the very first body paragraph. We notice, if we look at it, we notice, first of all, it has a transitional phrase to begin. Now, adding the main idea sentence to it, and again, here, I want parents to please notice and correct students who might want to capitalize this word right after the comma. Okay, so it's going to be, to begin, the warm sunny days of July scream beach in my ears. That's the main idea. The writer is writing about the 4th of July as their favorite holiday, and one of the things that it makes it their favorite holiday is that their family goes to the beach. Okay, so after the main idea sentence, that is when the examples, the descriptions, the elaboration on this main idea come into play. Now, what's really interesting is that this standard is also a reading standard. And if you go over your reading comprehension tests with your child, oftentimes they'll ask, how does the author support the idea that George Washington Carver was dedicated in his work? And then what the student has to do, what the reader has to do, is go back and find out what proof did the author provide to show that George Washington Carver was dedicated to his work. And so you pick out the details that show dedication. The reverse process is the case here when students are writing, because they're trying to provide the evidence to support their main idea. Obviously, in this case, the main idea is about spending the day at the beach, spending the 4th of July at the beach. And so all of the details in there are provided to support that. In this case, this sample paragraph here uses a mini story, which is a separate video that you can watch later on. I want to draw your attention, though, to the ending of the paragraph. And this is also a very difficult spot for students. If you look at the very ending, and what we notice, we saw on our checklist, is that the body paragraph needs to end by restating the main idea. Remember, the main idea here is about spending the day at the beach. And remember that the thesis statement of the whole essay is that the 4th of July is their favorite holiday. We have to kind of smash those two things together in that final sentence of the body paragraph. Surfing at the beach makes the 4th of July my favorite holiday. So surfing at the beach was what was talked about in this body paragraph, and the thesis statement is the 4th of July is my favorite holiday. So that becomes the concluding sentence in the body paragraph. The essay goes on to have 2 more body paragraphs that follow basically that same structure, and that is what we're trying to get students to do when they create their own essays. Okay, so let's take a look at the different steps that we talked about in our mini lesson, and students created this chart in their own notebooks so that they can reference this chart whenever they need to. Okay, so when we write a body paragraph, we select a transitional phrase and add our main idea sentence from our outline. That's our first that's our first sentence, okay? That's our very first sentence when we're writing, okay? And I would like to even add this indent right here, because I think that that's really important to keep reminding students, and then later on to hopefully have to stop scaffolding that because they just start doing it automatically. Okay, so what do we do next? Well, once we've done that, remember, once again, we have to go ahead and support, our main idea by elaborating. So we want to introduce our first piece of information. We go back to our planning sheet and we look at our bullets. Our bullets are the details we wanted to talk about. Okay, I'm going to model later on this body paragraph here about the incredible assemblies, and you'll notice that I talked about an author visit with Henry Cole, an insect chef. I also have the Hawaiian luau with flaming batons. These are the details.
Miss Rosemary, please turn your walkie up. Miss Rosemary. All custodians to the cafeteria, please. All custodians to the cafeteria.
I apologize for that. All of these details are here of the things that I would want to talk about when I write my essay. And I did this work during my planning time, so it's already done. Okay, so we're going to introduce one of our details. We're going to go to our chart, and we're going to decide, are we going to use for example, or for instance, another example? Then we're going to introduce it. So we're going to introduce it, and then we're going to elaborate on the detail. So, for example, if I was thinking about the author visit with Henry Cole and Pamela Duncan Edwards when they came, I'm going to want to elaborate and say more. I don't want to just say, for example, Henry Cole, because we need to say more about it, because I'm trying to show that this assembly was incredible. So I'm not just going to give a list of the assemblies that have been here. I have to say more about them. And say more is a good prompt for you to use with your children. So once I introduced the detail, then I'm going to say more about it. For example, when I'm writing my body paragraph, I might say something like, to begin, Schitt's Creek Elementary has incredible assemblies. For example, notice the transitional phrase to introduce the detail. One time, author Pamela Duncan Edwards and author-illustrator Henry Cole came to our school to make a presentation. Now, if I stop right there, the reader is going to say, and if I'm trying to support the idea that this was an incredible assembly, I have to say more. Okay? Now, I do have these transitional phrases that I can use in my writing, and I can include it in there if it's going to help me, or I can just think about it and then write about it. So if I think about what made that incredible, I might go on to say more. While Pamela Duncan Edwards was speaking, Henry Cole drew silly caricatures of her on a large tablet. He made goofy faces behind her back and had us laughing so hard our bellies hurt. It was so much fun. The last part there, it was so much fun, that is how I am showing that it was incredible. It was incredible because it was fun. Not all assemblies are fun. And then when I go on to introduce my next detail, I'm going to go right back here. I'm going to choose a transitional phrase, another example, and then I'm going to move on to the next detail that's on my planning sheet, my bullet. So my next detail might say something like, another example was the assembly with the insect chef. Okay? I can't stop there. I need to say more about it. Remember, my main idea is that these assemblies are incredible, so I have to show that. He cooked different kinds of insects and called students up to try them. The kids made funny faces as they munched and crunched fried scorpions, grasshoppers, and beetles. I've never seen anything quite like that before. Okay, so that shows how it's incredible. Now, I'm going to show you the sample here that we used in class, written in the notebook. Now, students were given a printed, they didn't write this down, but they were giving a computer-generated printout of this that they glued into their own notebooks. So they have this as an example that they can go back and refer to. At the very end of the body paragraph, it's important, remember, to remind the reader what our main idea sentence was about and to tie it back to the thesis statement. In this case, the thesis statement that I'm modeling this essay after has to do with Chetts Creek Elementary being the greatest school on the planet. So the final sentence reads, "Incredible assemblies make Chetts Creek the greatest school on the planet." Okay, so this might seem to you to be quite a lengthy body paragraph, and for beginning writers it may be, but this is the expectation at 4th grade. I'm going to go back and I'm going to read the entire body paragraph to you. Pay close attention to the different parts in the structure. To begin, Chetts Creek Elementary has incredible assemblies. For example, one time author Pamela Duncan Edwards and author-illustrator Henry Cole came to our school to make a presentation. While Pamela Duncan Edwards was speaking, Henry Cole drew silly caricatures of her on a large tablet. He made goofy faces behind her back and had us laughing so hard our bellies hurt. It was so much fun. Another example was the assembly with the insect chef. He cooked different kinds of insects and called students up to try them. The kids made funny faces as they munched and crunched fried scorpions, grasshoppers, and beetles. I've never seen anything quite like that before. Incredible assemblies make Chetts Creek the greatest school on the planet. Hopefully this summary of our mini lesson will help you as you work to help your child at home. Feel free to view this often and let your child view it too. And hopefully, as students become more confident in their writing, they will develop into essayists who can create very solid, cohesive body paragraphs that support their main ideas. Thanks for watching.